This interview is dedicated to the beloved artist and One Direction's own, Liam Payne. I never had the honor of meeting Liam, but his presence and music meant so much to me and so many others around the world. His voice and impact will live on forever. In this interview, I had the privilege of chatting with legendary songwriter Savan Kotecha, one of the key people who helped Liam, One Direction, and so many artists find their voice. This conversation was recorded before Liam's tragic passing, a loss that has deeply affected so many around the world. And I wish that Liam could see how many people and how many lives he changed because of his incredible voice, his incredible message, and his incredible music. Before we begin, Savan asked me to share this heartfelt message in honor of Liam and his family. Hey everyone. Since this conversation with Daniel was recorded, the world has changed with the tragic passing of Liam Payne. As you'll hear in my conversation with Daniel, my time with Liam in One Direction was truly life-changing. Liam played a huge role in making my wildest dreams come true. He was a light, and I'll forever be grateful that he was a part of my life. I know I speak for millions of fans when I say he will be missed beyond words. Lots of love, Savan.
5 kids walk in, and I was like, they have something, and it was One Direction.
Today we have vocal coach Savan Kotecha.
One of the biggest names and people in all of music, Usher, Ariana Grande, Weeknd, One Direction. It was said that you sold over 300 million records.
I woke up to a text from Harry going, I think you really nailed it with this one.
You're really the 6th member of One Direction.
I meet Simon Cowell when I'm like 19 years old. They weren't screaming for the winner of X Factor, they were screaming for One Direction.
That's crazy.
We have Ariana Grande, do you know who she is? And I started singing one more time. When you have those gifts that she has, anything felt possible. And when we got his vocal, it was like, oh shit, it's like Michael Jackson,
yeah.
You know? I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't understand why my kids wanted to hug me. That's how messed up my thinking was, this sort of intertwinement of self-worth and achievement. A friend pushed me to get into therapy and save my life, to be honest with you.
Welcome back to Behind the Wall. Super excited because we have somebody today who's one of the biggest names and people in all of music and movies. 5 years ago, it was said that you sold over 300 million records. That's records, not streams, as in physical records. If we were gonna say streams on Spotify alone, I was actually doing the math last night in my bed. Oh, wow. I was counting up, and just on Spotify, Savan said, from my rough math, it's over 40 billion streams. In fact, Savan, you've written, co-written, and made some of the biggest songs of all time. And I'm so excited to be sitting down and chatting with you today.
Oh, thanks, man.
For anyone who doesn't know who you are, what are some of the songs that they would know you from?
Oh, gosh. I'm old, so let's see. If You Seek Amy, DJ God's Falling in Love, One More Night, Maroon 5, then on to What Makes You Beautiful, Live While We're Young, Can't Feel My Face, Love Me Like You Do, Problem, Bang Bang, Love Me Harder, One Last Time, No Tears Left to Cry, God Is a Woman. Gosh, I'm forgetting stuff.
We're going to go over all of them.
Yeah.
There's so many. It's actually incredible. In terms of everyone I've talked to, the amount of hits you have, it's insane. And especially like songs that I grew up with listening. It's some of my favorite songs ever. Even like one you just said right now, DJ Got Us Falling in Love Again by Usher. He just performed at the Super Bowl. Like that's crazy. I had no idea you wrote that one.
Oh, well, thanks. That was a fun one.
So I definitely want to go over all of those, but I was looking further into your story, and now it's time I ask an important question. Is it true that Uncle Jesse from Full House was what inspired you to start writing music?
In a roundabout way, yeah. I didn't know what I was doing when I was writing songs. So I remember, like, you know, I'm from a very traditional Indian family. Like, music was not something that was an option for me. And when I started writing songs, it was literally we just moved to Austin. I didn't have a bedroom. I was sleeping in the family room, and everyone was going to sleep, and I couldn't fall asleep. So I just took out my sister's old Yamaha keyboard, and I just started like jamming on it with headphones on, and I started figuring out chords, and I started writing songs. I didn't know what I was doing. I was doing that every night while my parents and my sister would go to bed. I would put on headphones and do that, and started coming up with melodies and stuff. I didn't know what I just didn't know what I was doing. But then I would watch like Full House, and I'd see like Uncle Jesse, and he'd have a studio in the basement. I was like, oh, that's kind of what I'm doing. And it's actually really funny. I've actually said that to a few people, and a friend of mine, a dear friend named Eric Vitro, who's the most fantastic vocal coach on the planet. He works with every major artist, and he's really close to Stamos. So and it's been one of my things ever since I made it. There was one time I had a friend who was mutual friends with Stamos, and we were going to all have dinner, and Stamos didn't show up. He was stuck on like Glee or one of those shows he was doing, and I was so disappointed. And one day randomly, I get a phone call from my friend Eric Vitro, and I had a really shitty day. And I remember just waiting. I was doing that thing of like sitting in my driveway, just trying to like get into the house and with a smile on my face because I've got 2 kids. So just sort of calming myself going through the day. And I had my phone pop since Eric calls, and I was like, okay, it's Eric. I got to pick up. Call. And I go, hey, Eric, how are you? And he goes, hey, man, I have someone who wants to talk to you. And then a second later, there's a guy, hey, it's John Stamos. Like, totally, like, everything that went wrong that day went away. And I was like, oh. And he was like, I hear you owe me some royalties. It was brilliant.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Uncle Jesse wasn't, if Full House wasn't there, I wouldn't probably been the song. I wouldn't have known what I was doing.
That's incredible.
So, yeah, there you go.
So now, today, you've written massive songs. You've been a part of massive songs. You've co-written them. But I wanted to ask, because I think it's a really important part of your story. One of the things that I've tried to do with this series was to shine a light on the people and stories behind music, movies, and media.
Yeah.
Recently, it's changed. My goal and mission with this series is more to inspire every underdog to go for it. I think your story really fits into that mission really well.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, it was, I was pre-internet. So when I started making music, I had a boy band in high school. We called ourselves a vocal harmony group. And I would start like writing songs. And after a while, they would be like, hey, let's just sing some of your songs. And they'd harmonize to my choruses. And I started making demos, getting a tape deck and pushing record. And that's how I'd make demos. I knew nothing about the music business and no connections or whatsoever. It was also around a time when like South by Southwest was sort of this indie music festival.
Interesting.
And I was living in Austin, but you don't go downtown when you're in high school in Austin. That's like, back then, downtown was for like the university students and stuff like that. Mm. And, but I knew of South by Southwest. And, I was doing everything I could to get songs out there and heard, and, whether it's calling 96.7 KHFI in Austin and like singing and doing like asking the DJ if I could sing, and we would do like sing-offs between, me and someone else, or like, I would go South by Southwest, and I would go to like, I think it was the DoubleTree Hotel, if I remember correctly. This is again when it was a small indie festival, and all the label people had name tags, and that was where they stayed. I did my research and figured out where a lot of people stayed. And I'd go there with a box of demo tapes, and I would pass out demo tapes to anyone with a badge. I'd be like, are you a record label? Or and people would take my tapes, and then eventually I'd get kicked out for soliciting. So I'd go back down to the car, I'd change my shirt, I'd put a hat on and go back up again. And I was doing those kind of things. Every dime I could save was blank cassettes and stamps and envelopes. Like, my parents had no idea what I was doing. My grades started like looking horrible, so they were obviously freaked out. Very traditional, cliche Indian family, so that was like horrible for them. But something inside me told me I had to do it. Like, I was a huge Babyface fan. That was my guy. Like during that era, and it was in the gossip column in the Austin American Statesman once that Babyface was vacationing with his family in Lake Travis. I was like, oh my God, this is my chance to meet Babyface. So I like stayed up the whole night. I wrote this letter, and I did copies of my demo, like tape to tape. So it was like real time. You had to like wait for the whole thing to copy. And I looked while my tape was making copies, I was looking up the yellow pages. Again, it was pre-internet. So I like highlighted all the addresses of rental condos around Lake Travis. I convinced 3 friends to come with me, 6 a.m. We get in the car and we drive and we knock on every single door and all the addresses that I found. And for everyone that didn't answer the door, I left a demo tape on the doorstep. You just had to do all those things to make it. I mean, I didn't know any other way, so I just made shit up. And eventually people started replying to my demos that I would send out. In Barnes & Nobles, like I found a book of music industry addresses. And, eventually people started replying. I would get letters of feedback from random music publishers. Again, it would be like one in San Francisco, one in like Omaha, and things like that had nothing to do with the kind of music I was making. But it would be funny. Like I would I'd get a reply with like positive feedback, like, oh, I dropped my spoon while I made my tea that morning. So I'd start dropping my spoon every morning. Everything was about like wanting the universe to give me some feedback. I ended up having to remember like so many things to do throughout the day. It became this like OCD thing that I had. And eventually like people started replying, and it was like, hey kid, I like what you're doing. Keep sending me music. Or, and then at one point I got this letter from a guy in Nashville, and he goes, hey kid, I really like your tape. I can make you a star. If you pay me $3,000, I'll make proper studio recordings of your demo, and you could perform in a showcase at the Wild Horse Saloon in Nashville, and I'll publish your songs.
Wow.
I was like, oh my gosh. I had no idea what that meant, by the way, but I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to publish my song. That just sounded cool. So I went to school the next day, and guess what? This guy's going to publish my songs. And I started like saving up money, and I kind of told my parents about it because I needed like them to know I'm going to go to Nashville, and they had to come, like someone had to drive me and take the long trip. And they were like horrified by this whole thing, but I think they were just humoring me, and they were like, yeah, if you earn the money yourself, you do what you want with your money. And a few weeks later, I'm getting ready for school, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, and this guy goes, hello, is Savan Kotecha there? It's like, yeah, this is Savan. And he goes, hi, I'm not going to say the guy's name because I don't want to call him out, but he's a great guy. We're still in touch. And this guy from Jive Records calls me. He goes, I don't know how your shitty demo got on my desk, because I think my secretary put it there, but there's actually a song on here I really like. And I was like, oh, thanks, man. And I had no idea that this was a big deal. And he was like, well, listen, I just signed this band out of Florida called Backstreet Boys, and I'd love them to try out this song. And I was like, well, it goes, as long as it's not published.
This is before they were big, right?
Yeah, this is when he just signed them. So back in the day, there was a company named Zomba owned Jive Records, and you couldn't get a cut with a Jive Records artist unless Zomba published the song. So he goes, if the song's not published, I'd love to try it with the band. I was like, well, and he's like, how old are you? I was like, I'm 17. He's like, you write it yourself? I was like, yeah, I wrote it myself. He's like, okay, is it published? I was like, no, but I'm saving money because this guy in Nashville is saying that and I was like, and I really want a record deal for my vocal harmony group. And he was like, trying to talk me out. He's like, you're never supposed to pay, money to get your song published. I've never heard of this guy. Let me ask my Nashville folks, because if we don't know this guy, trust me, he's not legit. I'm with Jive Records. We're like a legit label. I was like, I didn't know what Jive Records was. So I didn't, there was no internet at the time to look shit up. So I was sort of suspect of this guy because he was kind of like abrasive. And after, then he kept talking to me, and he was like, listen, kid, you're not the greatest singer if that's you singing on the tape. And he's like, that's not the only problem. He was like, I could tell by your name you're a different ethnicity. I was like, yeah. He was like, look, I'm a Black American, so I'm saying this with utmost respect. I just want to be real with you. And he was like, you mind telling me what ethnicity you are? I said, I'm Indian. He goes, well, listen, kid, no girl in Wisconsin's going to put an Indian guy on her wall. You should just be a songwriter. And I was like, oh. And it sort of stuck with me. I ended up doing the $3,000 thing, getting ripped off. But I realized during that time, like, oh, I should just be a songwriter. And yeah, and when I did that showcase, even though I got ripped off, and the Jive Records guy stayed in touch with me, he during the Millennium album actually called me again and said, look, if you can get that song back, I'd love to try it with them. I have this other song called I Need You Tonight, and I can replace it with your song if you can get it back. And I couldn't get it back because the guy ripped me off and disappeared, right? But during that showcase that I did, a manager saw me and said, actually, you're really talented. I like your songs. I'm going to send it to, if you're ever in New York, I'm going to introduce you to this lawyer in New York. And I luckily, like a year later, had this cousin that got transferred to New York from the UK. And I asked my parents, can I go visit my cousin? And my ulterior motive was to go to New York, and meet this lawyer. And they said yes. And I went and visited my cousin, but I stayed at his place, but I went and I met this lawyer who hooked me up with a lot of publishers. And my last meeting, everyone rejected me. Everyone was like, no, your songs aren't good enough, or your demos aren't more professional enough. And this one guy, Clyde Lieberman at the old BMG Publishing, was like, I hear something in this. Let me send it to a new guy we hired in LA, a guy named Benjamin Groff. And he goes, let me see what he thinks. And then eventually they signed me.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that was the short, long version of the story.
That's a crazy story. You brought up your family for a sec there. Music is kind of a untraditional path.
Yeah.
Especially for someone coming from a very traditional family.
Yeah.
Were your parents supportive of you in this career?
No, they were horrified. I mean, now that I'm older and I have kids of my own, I get it. You know, they were immigrants. They were from Uganda. They were kicked out of Uganda. They came to this country and they worked hard to make a life for us. And then it was like, and you know, we were raised around an Indian community, all immigrants, right? And music was just nothing. They had no reference for it. You know, and I was the only one. My whole career, I was like the only Indian guy in the Western music business. So my dad was kind enough, because my grades were so bad, I was skipping class and sneaking into the choir room throughout high school. And he was like, look, you're going to have 2 years. We're going to allow you to live in our house. You have to go to community college. If in 2 years you can't figure your stuff out, you're going to university. Otherwise, I'm kicking you out. So I luckily got a publishing deal within those 2 years. But it was like it was a weird thing for them to accept. Even still, my mom was a bit, even though everything I've done and bought her a home and all that kind of stuff, it's still such a strange thing for them to accept. It wasn't really until I did X Factor, because all my relatives live in the UK. When I did X Factor, I was on television. So everyone was like, oh my God, Savan's on TV. And it was like, that's what they thought I did for a living all of a sudden. But yeah, it was a tough one. You know, there were times where like, because I was raised in this big Indian community where I would avoid going to like the grocery store after high school, because I was like the loser in my parents' house writing songs when like all my friends went to college and did other things. And I had no idea if this thing was going to work out. And if I went to the grocery store and I saw like an Indian auntie, they would like lecture me about what I'm doing with my life. So I just avoided places where I knew family friends would be and things like that for a while, because it was just, you know, it was mentally pretty tough to sort of feel like the black sheep of a community that raised you, you know. But then there you go. It worked out. So
the next part of the story, does that lead to X Factor then?
No, next part of the story was Sweden. So I signed my first publishing deal. This is like 1999, early 2000s. And they were like, go to Sweden. This is where all the pop music is happening. Don't go to LA. I had yet to meet another songwriter in my life.
Wow.
And I did everything by myself on Cakewalk on a PC. And they sent me to Sweden for a writing trip. At first, you know, there was a company called Merlin. So there was Sharon with Max and Dennis Pop and all these people, and they did all those songs. And then there was a company called Merlin, which basically, so if Sharon did like Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys, Sharon did like, Merlin would do like 98 Degrees and Jessica Simpson. So whatever, like,
interesting,
you know, and record labels were giving any Swedish producer like 4 or 5 song deals or album deals, because they were like, there's something in the water in Sweden. We have to be a part of it. So at the time, BMG was talking to Merlin to be their administrator. I think they ended up going to Universal at the end, but they were like, oh, we have this new kid. They're like, oh, send them to Sweden. And I'd never been anywhere other than the UK and America. So I'd never they sent me to Sweden, and I just, you know, the first songwriter I met there, the guy from BMG picks me up from the hotel and he goes, I want to introduce you to a couple of writers and producers. So the first writer he introduced me to was a guy named Red One.
Wow.
And Red introduced me to some of his friends. Again, broke writer at the time. I started getting, you know, collaborations in Sweden, and like I would get cuts like in Europe, and I like had a hit in like Denmark or had a hit in, you know, and then BMG was like, oh, this is going good. So every time I go back to the States, after a few months, they'd send me back to Sweden. And eventually one of my friends there, who was part of Red One's team at the time, was like, hey, why do you keep going back? Because this is like pre 9/11, so I had an American passport. He's like, you don't need to go back all the time. If you keep complaining when you go back, I would, you know, miserable, you're writing by yourself. And I started making friends in Sweden and other songwriters. So when you finally meet people who have like similar interests as yours, like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like I found my home. And I was like, yeah, I don't need to go back, I guess. And he was like, yeah, let me just go to the immigration office. So he took me to the immigration office. Back then, again, pre 9/11, American passport. Right away, they give you a visa. I didn't have any money, though. I had very little money. So I slept on Red had a studio apartment, half the size of this room. I'm not kidding you. He had a cot, and I slept on the floor for like 6 months. And both broke writers, trying to make it. And when I had no money, when I was like, oh crap, I have no place to live, because they don't rent you apartments in Sweden. It's always like secondhand, So if you couldn't find anything, I would go to London and I'd stay with my relatives in London. And one of the trips I was in London, and BMG calls me up and they said, listen, you should do some A&R meetings here. I was like, great, I'll do some A&R meetings here. And there's like this one guy who's one of the biggest pop A&Rs. He's got a couple boy bands that are coming out that are going to be big. Called Simon Cowell. You should go meet him. This is pre-Idol or anything like that.
Okay.
So I go and I meet Simon Cowell when I'm like 19 years old. My first A&R meeting was Simon Cowell.
That's crazy.
And he remembers this a little bit as well. And he, from that day onwards, became like an angel on my shoulder. So he had a huge boy band called Westlife. Mm-hmm. And he didn't cut my songs right away, but I think a year or two later, of always listening to what I have, he started cutting my songs on Westlife. And that was a huge break for me, because Westlife, many Americans don't know this, but Westlife outside America, when that pop boom died in America, Westlife was going strong in the rest of the world, selling millions of albums. And Simon, people know him as a television producer, or like a judge. Before he was the best pop A&R person in Europe. Like everything Simon Cowell touched sold records. It was always cheesy pop. It wasn't like the cool stuff, but I was like, I love that stuff. So I just became one of Simon's guys. And I was in Sweden, and he would send artists, and I would write songs for Simon's acts with a lot of the Swedish producers I befriended. And that's how I got my sort of big break, because I was having hits all over, like multiple hits a year in the UK and Europe with Simon Cowell.
Wow.
And then X Factor happened sort of after we had a long, relationship. I think if I remember correctly, a DJ God's Falling in Love and If You Seek Amy happened for me, because by then I started working with Max once in a while. And he asked me if I would do X Factor. I was like, I don't know, Simon, because I previously worked with a lot of the winners and stuff like that. He's like, I don't know, Simon, I'm starting to have hits outside America. I was trying to like separate myself from the UK cheesy pop I was doing, because I was finally getting like the calls to do like cooler American stuff. And he goes, Savan, just go meet the contestants, And I went to London. I was like, okay, because I owed Simon so much. I go meet the contestants, and Cheryl Lloyd walks in. And I was like, oh, that's something. And then these 5 kids walk in. And what I noticed when the kids walk in is that for the rest of the contestants, they had sort of got me like this meeting room where like I had 30 minutes with each contestant. That's what we did, just to get to know them and see if anything inspires me. And Cher inspired me, but it was always like the artists would go in by themselves. But when these 5 boys walked in, I noticed that all the women from the office came in the room as well. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And they were the funniest kids. They had known me from some of my songs like Westlife that they grew up with, because they were UK and Ireland. And like, oh my God, you did these songs. And I thought they were just the best kids. And I was like, they have something. And it was One Direction. And and then I did X Factor that year, which was the funnest 3 months. I mean, I've made lifelong friends from the people that worked on that show. And
What were you doing on X Factor?
We tried to find a role for me. So we made it like vocal producer.
Okay.
So I could help mold them and on air as well. But like, it was really, I tried not to be on air. I put on stupid wigs throughout the series.
I saw some of those.
I was thinking no way they're going to put this in the edit, but they did.
You're also very good at accents. I saw you do a couple accents, like Niall's accent. And stuff like that
yeah.
Too.
We did a lot of fun, like behind the scenes comedy sketches and stuff. And for the 4 finalists or the 5 finalists, I wrote comedy songs for them. Like for One Direction, it was What's Happening Boys. And I just fell in love with those guys and that whole process. And then when it was over, it was like, okay, I'd go on tour a little bit and with the X Factor tour, because I started working for Psycho, for Simon's label. So I was assigned the Cher Lloyd album to make, and then I was supposed to advise for One Direction, and then Cher happened, and then one day lightning struck, and What Makes You Beautiful was written. And first I think Up All Night was the first one to just get it going, and when What Makes You Beautiful happened, we didn't really know. It's interesting. Like I wrote it for my wife, and I knew it was correct, the song. You know what I mean? Like when we wrote it, I had that phrase and a bit of the start of the chorus melody, and Carl and Rami were playing with chords and stuff, and I went out of the room and listened to some voice notes, and I had and then I read it that morning. I had written down on my phone from something my wife had said. Like I wrote down like, "Oh, you're beautiful. You don't know you're beautiful. Or that's what makes you beautiful." And started singing that along to whatever the chords were, just. And when it was done, I mean, I tweaked it a little bit in New York, and like there were, before the boys went to hear it, but I don't think any of us realized like, oh, it was going to be this thing, And I remember like, yeah, I think because even though the label wanted me to change some of the lyrics, the What Makes You Beautiful part, and I was like, no, I think we're so used to Westlife singing these songs, but I think a new generation of kids aren't used to that, and they're luckily at the end they agreed, and I remember being at I ended up doing X Factor America, and I remember being at the viewing party when Steve Barnett and Rob Stringer were there, who at the time were the heads of Columbia in America. And they both, I knew them for a while, and we're pretty close. They both came up to me like, "What Makes You Beautiful is going to be huge." I was like, "You think?" Like I had no thought of it's going to be huge in America. We just knew the band was special, and
the song also sounded like it came from a genuine place.
Yeah, definitely. I find that with most of the things that have worked for me, even the ones that you wouldn't expect, they're like the sexy songs where there's always like a grain of truth in it. Mm-hmm. And What Makes You Beautiful, yeah, it was written about my wife. When I met my wife, it was one of the first. It was when I went to Sweden during one of those trips, and some friends convinced me to go to a bar. I never really went to bars, and I saw her walk in. My back was facing the door, and a bunch of people walked in. I just saw the people I was with sitting across from them. They like waved at people. I turned around and I saw a bunch of people. I was like, "Who's that?" We went to school with them. And then I looked back again and I saw my wife. I didn't see my wife's face until she flipped her hair. Hence the way that you flip your hair because you're overwhelmed. And I saw my wife. I was like, and they were like, we could go talk to them if you want. I never had a girlfriend before in my life. My wife's my first and only girlfriend. And because I wasn't allowed to date. I'm from a very traditional Indian family. Not that girls were like knocking down my door, by the way. But yeah, so it was a really special night for me, and luckily it came together in that song,
For sure. I want to come back to What Makes You Beautiful because, like statistically, one of the biggest songs. One Direction, statistically one of the biggest groups of all time. But many people may not know that you're like really the sixth member of One Direction in a way. You kind of helped develop and form and push them as a group. What was that process like to kind of mentor them?
Yeah, I mean, and then by the way, that's sort of the early days, the first two albums. But it was part of it. It was amazing. It was an amazing process to be a part of that, to be part of something early on from the get-go, really, and to see like the fan base forming. It became this sort of like it became its own thing. It's hard to explain. There was a group of us on X Factor who were really like, making sure that, okay, make sure it's guitar pop because they don't dance. And like there was all of that. They were just great kids. They were really funny, great kids. And it was just a pleasure and something I'm really proud of. And yeah, it was an amazing time, and eventually they moved on. They wanted to grow musically and all that. And they moved on from me. But like, it's something so special, and I still love those guys. I'm still in touch with a lot of them, and
amazing.
It's amazing to see what they did after. They really earned it, and yeah, it's me. It's so funny when I'm with Simon or any other people on the show. We just reminisce about those days and how like this, they didn't win X Factor, but every time that every week that went by, like crowds around the studio grew and grew and grew and grew until it became this pandemonium, even at the rehearsal places. And they weren't screaming for the winner of X Factor, they were screaming for One Direction. And it was just an amazing thing because I got into pop music as well, like loving boy bands. Like my sister was quite introverted when she grew up, and until New Kids on the Block happened. And then New Kids on the Block happened, and I remember this, that all of a sudden she had friends around because like it gave them something in common, right?
Yeah,
It was
common interests.
and it always meant more to me than just like, oh, a cheesy boy band. It always meant more like, hey, this is important for a very important time in people's lives, that shape a lot of them in their life. And you could be the introverted girl or the girl with not many friends or the popular girl. This all of a sudden gives you something in common with everyone else.
It's very true.
And it's more than just music, And I think that's really, I've always wanted to be, that's the power of pop music. And I've always wanted to be a part of that. So for me, it was, finally, I felt like it was fulfilling sort of this dream or this destiny of why I love pop music in the first place.
So you mentioned it earlier with What Makes You Beautiful, but tell me how you wrote One Direction's What Makes You Beautiful.
So, yeah, I was in the bathroom. I tell the story a lot. I was in the bathroom at the Royal Garden Hotel in the UK. Shout out to the Royal Garden. My wife was on the other side of the wall. We had just gotten married some months before. And she was just like fixing her hair. I was like, oh, I feel so ugly today. I was like, oh, you're so beautiful. You don't know you're beautiful. And I wrote that line down. I'd called Carl and Rami. So I'd done a couple of songs for the boys, like Up All Night. And I was helping put together the album, getting other writers and producers interested in the band, which was tricky at first because a lot of people are like, I don't want to do a boy band, And I asked my good friends Carl and Rami. So Carl Falk, who earlier in my career, I did a lot of Westlife songs with and a few Westlife hits with. I hadn't worked with him in a minute. And Rami Yacoub, who became one of my close friends. We did a lot of Simon Cowell stuff together, Shane Ward, and a few other things that if you live in the UK, you'd know. I hadn't worked with them in a minute, and they started working together. And I called them up and I was like, look, I need your help with this. I just knew instinctively. Carl had, Rami is old school. Rami produced Hit Me Baby One More Time, wrote It's Gonna Be Me, a lot of the Backstreet stuff. He was part of Sharon. Mm-hmm. And I just had instinctively felt that they would be the right people to do this with. And I kind of told them the direction. Look, we need to make it guitar pop. We got to make it fun. And we got to figure out how to do it where it's not trying to be cool. And they started, Carl's like an amazing musician, started jamming around with riffs and chords and couldn't figure out anything. And I stepped out of the room, went through my voice notes, which I do because I always record melodies all the time in my voice notes. And I found, it was something like that. I've got it somewhere in one of my old phones. And, started singing that along to what Carl was doing. I was like, I think I have something. And then, it just developed from there. I went behind the mic and started singing, oh, no, oh, oh. I've got the demo in my computer, the original demo.
I'd love to see that. Not now.
Yeah, I'll show it to you later. Yeah, I've got with my vocal. And it has a few different lyrics on there because the day before One Direction recorded, I was with Cher Lloyd in New York. And I was like tweaking lines of What Makes You Beautiful to send off to Carl and Rami and said, replace these lines, like to flip your hair and a few other things. And I woke up and they were recording the next day in Sweden and I was going to come the day after. Mm-hmm. So I missed the original day that they were hearing the song, but I woke up to a text from Harry going, I think you really nailed it with this one. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah. And that was What Makes You Beautiful. I still have the text somewhere as well.
That's amazing. One of the other songs I love by One Direction is One Thing.
Yeah.
How did that song come about?
So that was me, Carl, and Rami again. One Thing was actually two different songs.
Interesting. So
we had this, I wish I had those demos. Carl has them in his computer. We had, I don't playing it cool, but when I'm looking at you, in front of my heartache. And then we had like some other, I think we had Tell Me What to Do Now.
Yeah.
And that was it. And we could never crack the chorus. And I'm always one of those people, I start with the chorus first. And I feel like if you don't crack the chorus, it's like you have nothing. And then we had this other idea that was get out, get out, get out of my head. Da, da, da. We had that. and we couldn't crack either. And I just remember we were spending days and days on these like melodies, tweaking the melodies because we knew the melodies had to be as flawless as they could be. And I remember walking up in Stockholm, there's a street called Götgatan, and I remember walking up, talking to my wife how I'm so stuck on these songs, and I played her voice notes. And then in walking and playing the voice notes, like, oh wait, but that chorus works on this. And I called Rami and Carl. I think one of them picked up, and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's try that on Monday. And then we tried it, and it became one thing. That's one of my favorites as well. Actually, I thought that was better than What Makes You Beautiful when we wrote it, because that made more sense to me as like, yeah, this is really hooky.
Interesting. Yeah, to have a song as big as What Makes You Beautiful, though, it probably opened up because you had DJ Got His Phone and Love Again with Usher, and you had things where like hits with artists who've had hits.
Yeah.
But then when it came to One Direction, it's kind of breaking a group into the world. Was that like a different?
Yeah, that was the game changer. I actually remember sitting with Max before One Direction, and I was really frustrated because I started having hits. Like I started being a pretty reliable songwriter. Like most everything I wrote, because I was so in Simon Cowell world with Westlife and all those things. I was selling a lot of records and having hits in the UK, and then I started working with Max, and he was bringing me on things that he was working on. One ended up being If You Seek Amy and DJ. And I remember just going like, gosh, like, I feel like when I go to LA, I started doing writing trips to LA, and I was like, my contemporaries who don't have as much success as I do are in like rooms with, this is years ago. So Christina Aguilera, Whitney Houston, and all these people, and I can't get in those rooms. And he goes, man, like, he said something really important to me, which was like, that's because like you haven't broke anything. He goes, trust me, when you break something, that's when it changes. He goes, right now you're having hits with people that would have hits regardless if you were working with them. Like Britney Spears is going to have hits regardless if you were a part of If You Seek Amy. Like I'd be giving her stuff. Luke would be, and an Usher was going to have hits whether we had DJ Gauze Falling in Love or not. And he goes, when you break something, it changes everything. And that always stuck with me. And then, weirdly, it was actually Cher Lloyd and One Direction together, because we had Want You Back for Cher Lloyd that cracked. And the industry saw those two as like my projects. Obviously there's a team of people involved, but, I was spearheading that. And that changed everything. I mean, look, it wasn't like artists were calling me going like, I want a song like What Makes You Beautiful. It was more that the gatekeepers, like the label heads and the A&Rs were like, oh, you're a rainmaker. Like, come in and solve these problem projects for us. That was sort of the thing. And it just opened up. It was a confidence booster for sure, because I realized, oh, that's what I'm probably best at. Like cracking a code and putting the right creatives around the code and cracking it. And that's what I ended up like being a part of moving forward after sort of One Direction was done for me, Yeah,
I also was so surprised to hear, I had forgotten that Cher Lloyd and One Direction were on the same season.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. That song, Want You Back, has actually come back recently on social media. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not. It makes me so happy.
It's gone viral again, the verse part, which is really fun.
Amazing. Cher was such a talent. I mean, she was such she had such presence and star power. And it was my first time A&Ring something. So it was weird because that one is the one that broke in the States, but in England, it was another song that I didn't write, which was so like a thing of pride for me, because I wanted to make sure, like, I don't want it to be like a song that breaks or that I wrote. I really want to A&R this, and she had a number one in the UK with something I didn't write, which I think also helped, though, this whole thing of like, oh, you're a rainmaker. We know that you're not going to have like an agenda, that you're only pushing your songs. Because if anything, I've talked myself out of singles a number of times.
Interesting.
Because I just believe that the best song should win. And I don't believe in selling a song. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've been behind the desk now, and I saw during those years, it's like hard to find a hit song. No one's trying to put out a bad song. Do you know what I mean? Like, you are the people, there's so much involved in making those decisions. it is all with the best intentions of thinking that it's the best song. So again, like, when a lot of writers would be like, oh, I didn't get the first single, it's politics, it's blah, blah, blah. It's like, I really have empathy for the other side, having been there, that no, it's not actually. It's like, you are trying, whether the public agrees or whether you agree with it, you are trying to find the best song. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it made me approach songwriting in a different way. Like, I think of songwriting like A&Ring. And if I don't have the best song, I'll be the first one to tell the label that, yeah, maybe that's not the best one, or like that one's better than mine,
How was the process of writing Cher Lloyd's Want You Back?
Well, that one I have to give a nod mostly to Shellback. Like, he had that idea, and thankfully was willing to work on it with me and let it be for my artist that I was working on, because he was like, him and Max were on a roll. He could have, and he was the catalyst of that one. And Cher brought the personality, obviously, but
amazing.
He was like, he had that idea, and it was like, yeah.
It's interesting because Max Martin, considered to be probably, I'm going to say one of, because there's so many, but one of the greatest producers and you could argue the greatest songwriter, greatest producer of all time. Also, a collaborator of yours, a mentor. What are 3 lessons you've learned working with him?
One is, nothing is more important than the song, meaning that you do whatever. I mean, that's his gift. He's such a good collaborator, right? You do whatever you got to do, whether it's bringing someone else in or whatever. The song is the North Star. Whatever makes the song. Egos don't matter. None of that matters. We all start with a blank page. We're all equal playing field when we start writing a song, and the song is the most important thing. That's one. The other is melody first. I learned that from not only him, but like Christian Lundin, who was a part of Sharon. A lot of those guys that I became mentors for me when my days coming up. Like, melody is the universal language. That's really important. A lot of those oldest Sharon songs, they don't make any sense lyrically, but you don't realize that because the melody's so good. And the other was always let the song speak for itself. That's sort of what I was saying before. Like, don't hype the song to a label, whatever. Like, let the song speak for itself. If it's good enough, it's going to raise its hand because they want the best song.
Got it. Awesome. I'm pretty sure where I want to cover now is some of the songs that you wrote in that whole Max Martin, Carl, like those kinds of days.
Yeah.
Some of those songs before we move on to one of my favorite artists. But I think the only demo I've ever heard Max singing on, I believe it's DJ Got Us Fallen in Love.
Oh, did you hear it? How did that come out?
I think it's on YouTube, and I can show it to you.
Oh, wow.
After. How was it like to write Usher's DJ Got Us Fallen in Love?
So that was, I don't know if I'm allowed to say who it was, an attempt on another artist.
Got it.
That ended up not taking the song, but it was for Max and Shellback started like this idea, started singing melodies, and I was sitting next to them as well. Like, and I had this title, DJ Got Us Falling in Love. So I was like, how about DJ Got Us Falling in Love again, with the synth line they were doing. It was sort of just that and getting the melodies right. And then I started writing the lyrics during that time. Because usually during those days with Max and Shellback, those early songs I started with them, a lot of times it would be like they had started like a melody thing. It shifted later on, and I wasn't sure after even coming up with that line. I was like, oh, is that good? Because I'm not a fan of dance music. Mm-hmm. And so back then it was like, that was like one of the first like sort of dance songs that I did, that I was a part of. And I was like, I don't like dance music. So I was just like, is this good though? I don't know if it's good, He's like, trust me, it's good. It's good. I was like, but let's change DJ God's Falling in Love to something else. No, that was great. that line was great. Spent a lot of time trying to make the the lyrics and everything feel kind of cool. Because again, we were in Sweden doing like pop music. What we thought was like R&B and stuff like that was not what the Americans thought was R&B at the time. Even though I was American, it's still like I'd been there long enough where I sort of became Swedish in that sense. And I remember the excitement for, I was around Max more, so I don't know Shellback's reaction, but we were really excited that Usher was going to cut it, because he had never worked with like an R&B, like a black artist before. Like it was always pop stuff, and I'm a huge Usher fan. I mean, my gosh, like You Make Me Want on all those. So it was like one of the dream cuts. And I remember us being at Conway, and during that time, you never know, like if they, someone says they're going to do the label says they're going to cut something, and then things don't happen. So you just have to, by then I was also seasoned enough to know like, okay, don't get excited yet. And I remember we're at Conway and it's like, he shows up at 12 at night. And again, when we're there from like 6 in the evening, being told it's going to be 6 and then it's 8 and then it's 9 and then it's 12, you're thinking, oh, this isn't happening. And the next day, and to Usher's credit, by the way, who is the most amazing guy on the planet. Usher is a great guy. He had a 7 a.m. call time to be a mentor on American Idol. He doesn't show up to the studio until 12 o'clock. So, and it's a really high key. So him and Max are playing. He wanted to play Connect 4 with Max for some reason. I remember that. And we're just sitting there like, waiting for them to be finished. And then we're like, let's record. He was like, yeah, sure. So we go through the song. And we're sitting there, and the chorus is way too high for him. Baby tonight. It's like, baby tonight. He's like, don't worry. Let's just do the verses and the pre's, and I'll get the chorus. I'll be warmed up. So he sings the verses and pre's. Now it's time for the chorus. Baby tonight. Baby tonight. It's way too high. And we're like, me and Max are like getting nervous, like looking at each other. Fuck. Now it's like 2 a.m. and his like assistant or someone is going in like, hey guys, he's got a 7 o'clock call time. And Usher's like, hey, let's just lower the key. And now it's like 2 a.m. and we're like, you sure? He's like, yeah, come on, let's go. I'll do it again. I'll sing in the lower key. And to his credit, he's such a trooper. We ended up finishing at 4 a.m. Oh,
wow.
He's such an incredible vocalist, first of all.
Yeah.
So, but he allowed us to lower the key and he re-sang it in the lower key. And apparently when he showed up for American Idol at 7 on time, he was like the best mentor they had that season.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what a guy. Like at the time though, we were like so scared that this wasn't going to happen because we were so excited that Usher was going to record our song. And then it ended up, I remember when Pitbull got on, I think it was in Paris, with my wife, and I got the file, the MP3 with Pitbull's verse. And the excitement of that was like, oh my gosh, amazing.
Maybe there was a reason it needed to be a lower key because then it connected with people even more.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that song was probably the first time I felt like what a worldwide hit feels like.
I also will say that like DJ Got Us Falling in Love Again is a really great line for DJs to play the song.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about it back then because I never went out and stuff like that. So yeah, no, it was definitely like the feeling of like, oh, this is big. Like not the song, but when it was out, like, and that feeling of what happens when you have like a global song, that became like the addiction.
So continuing on this run, was Maroon 5's One More Night, was that with Max as well?
Yeah. I actually wrote, I was sent that idea here. When I was in this apartment, actually.
Wow.
And so they had this idea, him and Shellback sent it to me, and then I sent them like lyric ideas for that, and we just finished the song. And then again, that was supposed to be for another artist, the same one that DJ was written for.
Wow.
And Maroon, Adam loved it and cut it, and same room as DJ and Conway. I think the last addition to that was having Adam do that part. And yeah, it's another one. It was so exciting. Like that kind of happened around the same time One Direction, if I'm getting my years right. So it was an amazing sort of year for me. Like I helped break this band, and then Maroon 5 was like #1 for like 8 weeks. Yeah, it was such a great time during that time.
Amazing. Now, one of the biggest songs of the 2010s is Justin Bieber and Nicki Minaj's Beauty and the Beat. That's another one with Max. I remember on Justin Bieber's like documentary, there's a line of Justin Bieber singing it.
Yeah.
And Max Martin saying, "Oh, that's incredible. You're such a great singer." How was it like to make that song?
It took a long time. I think Zed sent the track, and it was just trying to figure out what it was, like what the song was and what it was gonna say and feel like. And it was weird. I'm trying to remember, during that time I was so in like One Direction world, I think, and all of that like I just remember it took a while to get it done and get like the words right and get it all feeling right, like song wise. That I barely recall. I wasn't there when I think I was in Sweden when Max was here recording Justin on it. And again, it was during the time where we were on such a like wave that like it was just like, yeah, another one. You know what I mean? Like it was such a strange time to like, now looking back, I'm like, gosh, that all feels like a blur. Because I remember going to Scooter's office and him showing me the video. And I was like, wow, that's really good. And Nicki's verse was amazing with the Selena. When we got those files back, it was like, we got Nicki Minaj on the song. This is so cool. It was at a time where it was like everything was sort of opening up for us all to not just doing the standard pop stuff, to do things where like a Nicki Minaj will jump on and like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. And like, or an Usher would record, or like a Maroon 5 would record, those things were like all of a sudden opening up. And to me, I think I just remember being so overwhelmed by excitement that all this stuff was happening, like all the work put in on these songs. Like Beauty and the Beat wasn't easy to write. It was like, getting the phonetics and getting the like melodies and rhythm, like all those things, a lot of like time and care was spent. So the fruits of that labor and all those things that I was around, and learning from Max, the amount of work you put into the song. Because that's the thing with someone like him, is that he also just works harder on every song than most people. It's like, and that's what we did during our run after that. We just worked on those songs, like, and tried our best to make it as of course we can be wrong, but try our best to make it bulletproof to us as possible. Like every second felt like it mattered, and didn't let go. We challenged each other and we kept, trying to better everything in the song constantly.
So the next artist that you help break is one of the biggest artists in the world today. In fact, your first song with her just hit 1 billion streams, Santa Tell Me.
Oh, that was No Problem was my first song with her. Yeah.
Tell me about how you started working with Ariana Grande.
I mean, gosh, what a gifted human and important person in my life. And collaboration with her was like game changing for me. It was very clear that I just moved to LA and we just had our first kid. And it was very clear that One Direction was moving on from me. And I remember just being super heartbroken about that. In hindsight, it was better for them. They, Julian Bonetta and those guys did an amazing job. Amazing. But it was, it was being a part of that from the beginning was a tough thing to take, just emotionally. And I was in a bit of a funk writing wise. I think I was a bad writer's block for like 6 months. We just moved here again. So much life changes. All these labels were throwing artists at me. Like they were throwing like their problem projects at me, And I remember Carl and Rami calling me one day. They were in town and they're like, hey, we're in with David Guetta. I'll get to the Ari part in the story. We're in with David Guetta. Well, come on, man. Just come and write something with us. So David comes in, he plays a chord progression, which then Carl adjusts. And at that time, I was just so mentally blocked. I was literally just got behind the mic and I was begging the universe for one more hit. And I started singing, one more time, I need to be the one to take you home. And most of that melody was stream of consciousness, but I kept singing one more time. And it felt awesome. It was the first time I felt like I had written a good song in in a minute. And, Rami came and he tweaked some things and Guetta didn't take it for his own. I was like, oh, fuck. And I hadn't finished the lyrics fully yet. So, but I had it in my back pocket. And I was doing more and more A&R meetings going, let me see what's out there. Let me just see what's around that inspires me. And one plane ride, I think I was coming from Austin or New York or something. I was sitting next to an old lady, and I'm a brown guy, so remember how weird this would be for the old lady. An idea popped in my head, and I was thinking yin yang twins. It's like, what if you had like a whisper song, but a girl singing a whisper song? Like if Mariah Carey had like the pre-chorus was like this huge melody, and then you drop to a whisper. And got my phone, and I'm like, and I have that voice note somewhere. I got one less problem without you. And I just feel the energy of the lady next to me going, this brown dude that looks like a terrorist is whispering something in his phone mid-flight. So I just like politely like get up and I go to the restroom, and I'm like in the restroom going, I got one less problem without you. I got one less. Yeah, and you drop into like 808. And then like I'm trying to figure out what a verse could be. And like they knock on the door because I'm taking a long time. Like, everything okay in there, sir? And I step out. And as soon as I step out, I hear like something like that should be the verse. So one more second. I close the door. And I had like the start of the verse melody and knew that, okay, big pre-chorus. And then you go into I Got One Less Problem Without You. And I had that idea, and I'd been trying to, I was in sessions here and there, just working with different producers, trying to find my new crew in America. I tried that idea with a few other people, and they couldn't, because I'm, now I can program a little bit, but after my cakewalk days, I never really programmed. It was just, I would describe what I want, and I usually found my collaborators to be the people that understood what I was saying. Like Carl Falk was really good. You mean something like this? Yeah, exactly, And I couldn't find that here because I was trying to describe, no, it would go into this like 808, like boom, 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 And so during that time, around that time I met Wendy Goldstein of Republic, who I kind of knew a little bit before. And she goes to me, look, I'd love you to we have Ariana Grande. Do you know who she is? And she was like, she just had this hit, The Way, and we're trying to figure out what the next step is for her. And I was like, yeah, I should meet her, because we've got these new Swedes are coming from Sweden that Max had signed, and he was like, yeah, you can work with these guys. Why don't you try working with these guys? And they're coming in like 2 weeks. So if maybe that's a project for something I do with them. So she sets up a meeting with me and Ariana, and me and Ariana just bond right away. And we're talking music, and she's talking about, I'd love to do something like Drake. And I had one last time. So I have a song, because when the demo of that feels a little Drakey in that that I know and I know and I know, especially with me singing it, I guess. And she loved it. She's like, oh my God, I love that.
It's a great song.
And I go, I also have this idea, because you can sing like really, you have an amazing voice, right? Like you can do all the tricks. She was like, yeah. She was like, I was like, I have this idea where you do like, it's a whisper song, but we do like a big melody, I didn't have it all there at the time. And she's like, yeah, I really like the idea. And I go, and then it goes like, I got one less problem without you. So Ilya flies in, and I go to Max is like, you should work with these guys, And I was like, oh, I have this one idea, and I told him the problem idea. You mean something like this? And the drop of the chorus was like, yes. And then I started singing the verse melody. Max came in, we started fixing the melodies. And then, I wrote the lyric. And Ilya nailed the track, and it became Problem. And Ari came and recorded one last time. I had two other guys from Sweden, one named Peter Svensson from the Cardigans, and the guy named Al Piami started the idea for Love Me Harder. Went in and we finished that. One of the dreams when I met Ari in my mind was, to do a new Lady Marmalade. So I go to one of our guys, Rickard Garanson. I was like, can you start a track or something that's very like, think Lady Marmalade. He started the track for Bang Bang. We came in and we wrote Bang Bang. And me and Max had Break Free. You know, really that's Max's melody on Break Free. And there was no lyric. And I was trying to crack the lyric for him for like a year, like genuinely. Because every time you change the pronunciation of anything, like it didn't feel as good. And I finally felt like I cracked it, and it was sort of in our back pocket. And I was like, that'd be interesting, like if Whitney Houston did Break Free. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
And now we have Ariana Grande, and she's just as good a singer. Like, and I played to Ari, and she loved it. And
Also amazing song.
and so all of a sudden, like we had Problem, Bang Bang, Love Me Harder, Break Free, and One Last Time.
That's incredible.
And I was like, oh shit, I'm back, baby, you know? And it created this magic time for all of us, I think, where the universe was just dropping gems into my head in the middle of the night or in the shower. And Santa Tell Me came to me in the shower. Santa Tell Me, do you really dare? Don't make me fall in. And I started creating my own process of how I did things. I started figuring out, okay, if I write choruses and I write them a cappella, because the average person just listens to when you have a song in your head, you don't have a backing track with it, right? You're singing it a cappella. So if it can be things, so I came up with this thing because I started realizing when I have these melodies that pop in my head, they're usually the strongest ones when they feel good a cappella, because like it's sing-alongable, you know. So I started using that as my sort of trick, you know, preparing for when artists come in, just making sure I have a chorus or something like that.
So Problem kind of started with you being on a plane with people around you, so you're whispering into your phone.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Tell me a bit about Love Me Harder, and then also The Weeknd with that song too.
So yeah, Love Me Harder was, you know, we just thought it was a great song when we wrote it, you know. Ali Payami, who's a sonic genius, started that track, and it was a big break for him. I didn't know anything about The Weeknd. And Wendy Goldstein, it was her stroke of genius, where she was like, I want to put The Weeknd on this. Do you know who The Weeknd is? And I didn't want to sound like I didn't. So I was like, yeah, I thought it was a band or he was a rapper. I genuinely thought that. So I didn't know what to expect when we got the vocal. Mm-hmm. And we just knew we loved the song. Like we really liked Love Me Harder a lot. And it was very understated, and we loved that. And when we got his vocal, it was like, oh shit, this guy's like, it's like Michael Jackson,
yeah.
you know? And it was amazing. When it worked, she called me after, Wendy, and said, hey, The Weeknd wants to work with you. Because, he wants to like now have big hits. And it would be great if you guys could work, you know? And I was like, sure, you know? But Love Me Harder sort of started that relationship. And I think, for him at the time, it was the biggest. I mean, he was obviously huge and like this cult following and was able to tour. But as far as commercial hit pop song, that was the first big one.
Amazing.
And for his team also to feel what that felt like. Because when there's a difference between when you just have like a buzzy, cool song and when you have like a real commercial big hit, Definitely. You feel it in the atmosphere, And that started off that relationship.
So going back to Ariana real quick, I also looked up that you wrote, this is so crazy to me, you wrote 2 songs for the show Victorious as well. Is that right?
In my early days, I wrote 2 songs. So I was friends. What was so weird was I had never met Ari before, but I was really good friends with Victoria Justice, and I was really good friends with Avin Yogi from the show.
That's crazy.
And yeah, I did 2 songs, Best Friend's Brother, and there was another one.
Begging on Your Knees.
Begging on Your Knees, yeah. For Victorious. So it was like a kind of full circle moment that like, oh, this is so familiar that we know each other, it was such a crazy time of, I think all of us, Amelia, Max, everyone, we were like, it was just, there was confidence, not arrogance, but there was confidence in our writing. And I was getting confident. I was really had sort of found I found my thing as a writer. And with melodies, I started finding my way of being really consistent with it, away from like just really cheesy or boy band pop, you know, and it was an amazing time. 8 years, it was so intense. I mean, it was like the amount of work we put into those songs and challenging every minute of it. I mean, I remember when we were doing Side to Side, I tell the story a lot. Like, we spent like 2 weeks on the pre-chorus melody of Side to Side. I know that sounds crazy to people, but we just I knew what the chorus was because I knew what that was. I knew it was like, this is, you know, like, this is something super special. And we had the verse melody, but I couldn't crack the pre-chorus melody. We had pre-chorus melodies that were good and that would have probably worked. But it was, again, this thing where we were all like, we put the bar so high for ourselves that like, no, it's not, it doesn't make the chorus feel amazing. Because in my philosophy, and again, there's no one way of doing things, but especially at the time, it was always like the chorus is holy. You know, the chorus is this holy thing. And if the chorus is great a cappella, if you feel it's great a cappella or by itself, and then when you hear the whole song, the chorus doesn't feel right, there's a problem before the chorus, you know? And I was almost in tears, like pulling out my hair for the pre-chorus. And then a guy named Alexander Krunlin, who was a great Swedish songwriter, was visiting. And I could go, Alex, can you come in here? I've been working on this for 2 weeks. I think Ilya has like 40 or 60 something versions of the pre-chorus in his computer that I was doing. Like,
that's crazy.
And we showed Alex what we were doing. I told him, like, I did this, I tried this, just this theory. And he goes, well, what if you try something like da da ba da 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 da, something like that? And he walked out of the room. I was like, you motherfucker! And it goes back to the thing of the song is the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, whatever we have to do to make that the best thing, we do, you know, pull people in, like, get help, play it for people, get feedback, like, from people you trust, obviously, you know? And that's what got that pre-chorus right.
Amazing.
You know?
3 of the biggest women in music being Jessie J, Ariana Grande, Nicki Minaj. You mentioned it briefly earlier, but Bang Bang, how did that song come together?
So Rikard Göransson took the assignment and he started doing this rough track. And he had a bit of the verse melody. And then we just listened to it and loved it. And then me and Max started singing melodies on it and jamming on it. And we sort of played it for Ari and she liked what we were doing. And then and I mean, that's what it was. And then we all were there, like, jamming a little bit. And after a while, me and Max settled in and put it together, like, structured it more. And it was such an exciting time. Again, we were just on this roll together, and Ari was such a muse for great creativity. I really credit her for all of those songs, in the sense that, like, she was such a great muse for that. Like, when you have those gifts that she has, and we knew we had those gifts at our disposal, anything felt possible. And the label was, you know, amazing and such great support. And it was just all gears were running, and you felt like, oh, it is possible to have a new Lady Marmalade. You know what I mean? Like, it is possible to get, and labels, yeah, we'll get Jessie J on it, and we'll get Nicki Minaj on it. And, you know, from where I was coming from, I was taking scraps, you know, for years and years trying to break, to have that sort of arsenal and confidence from the people around. It was like amazing, like anything was possible. And the song did what it did. And it's like become this sort of, it's like synced everywhere. And it's become like this
massive.
And it was an amazing time. I guess that's and it all stemmed from us jamming. He played us the track, he had a bit of it, and we started jamming. I've got voice notes of all of us in the room, sort of jamming, singing melodies. You can hear Ari in the background, like,
that's fun.
singing some of it, and then, the bang bang into the room. I remember I have the voice note where I started singing that. I had no idea what bang bang into the room meant, but it felt good,
There is also you made another song with Ariana Grande where it's kind of credited as being the catalyst for a lot of other songwriters and producers to learn how to make pop music. It was leaked onto the internet, the stems of the song. I've had quite a few music producers and songwriters tell me that this song was the reason that they know how to do pop music today.
Oh, wow.
That's Ariana Grande's Into You.
Yeah. It's so funny. Me and Ilya talk about that all the time because when we did it, it was, if you remember, it wasn't the biggest hit when it was out. And we were actually really disappointed at the performance of the song, again, because we were just used to everything going to like number one on radio and blah, blah, blah. I think Into You peaked at number 7 or 8 on radio. It wasn't at the time, it wasn't like a massive hit. But what had happened, I guess, is when the streaming era really took over, people started streaming it.
And loving it.
And that song, we had talked about it with Ariana to do I don't know if you remember, we talked about doing a cappella song. And Ilya went and started, he layered his vocal of doing and then we started jamming on that, trying to come up with something. I was like, it doesn't work doing an a cappella song. And I remember then he started putting a track together around that. And I remember just thinking, and this is how we approached a lot of songs at the time, was okay, what haven't we heard before? What hasn't Ari done before, or Whitney Houston, or any of these amazing vocalists? Well, I've never heard them do Michael Jackson-y kind of melodies. Ding 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 da. I bet it don't get you running. And that was the idea. It was okay, let's write something super rhythmic like that over this amazing progression thing that Ilya had. And obviously with Ari's vocal, you can do that. I'm so into you. And it just all sort of came together. I remember there was a different-ish verse melody that I had, and Max sort of heard it through the walls and came in, and he was like, hey, that's great, but what if you give it some space? So that I'm so into you, I can hardly breathe. Because I think I had something else that I'm so into you, I can hardly breathe in like a state on me. Or so, you know what I mean? It was a longer phrase. That's something Max is so great at. And something I've learned actually from him is space. Space is okay in a pop song. It's okay to have space, Because when you're writing, you want everything to be super active, you know what I mean, all the time. Mm-hmm. Because when you're writing it, space feels dull when you're in the room and you're singing ideas, right?
For sure.
And it just came together. And then, and with the track and the producer thing, I mean, really Ilya and Max then took that and they spent, I think, 2 weeks on that production, really honing it in. We had looked up our process on Into You, me and Ilya, the other day. And we realized the composition of Into You took a month.
Wow.
So it took 1 month. We had so many different versions of a pre-chorus. The chorus was somewhat usually there, but the verse and the pre to make it what it was. And the all those things, the songwriting, it wasn't every day for a month, but it was about a month in between when we started it and when we finished the song. And again, it's I always try and preach this to artists and producers that now it's this new generation of artists come and they're I want a song like Into You. It's yeah, but you have to then be willing to put the work in on an Into You. Because there was a lot of work that went on in Into You. It wasn't not just the production, but the songwriting of Into You. There was tweaking of melodies, living with something for a week or a day. I mean, I have all the voice notes of so many different iterations of what the verse melody is. And it was a very crafted song. And a lot of work went into it. It wasn't a 3-hour song. It was it was a lot of challenging every melody and every inch of the track. I know they did that with the track. Every sound they experimented with, and so there you go.
Amazing. The next group of songs by Ariana, there's 2 of them that I really want to go over. But there's a leaked demo of God is a Woman by another artist, Camila Cabello. How was it like to make God is a Woman with Ariana?
So God is a Woman, I think Ari's told the story as well. Like I had this chorus. I have the voice note here if you want to hear it. I actually have it in my phone.
Easy to get to?
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
It is right here because I saved it for you.
I love it.
So I was alone in the room, and it was one of those moments. I know I maybe this doesn't. I don't mean this to sound pretentious, but I just don't believe that anything is ours. You know, when it comes to creativity, I think it's all floating here, and I think I don't know why some people are given or in the right mind space or open to grab one of those things. And it was one of those moments where I was sort of alone in the studio room. I think everyone was eating lunch, and I had the title "God is a Woman" in my phone, and I wanted a song called "God is a Woman" to be written. I just thought that was a great concept, and I have 2 boys, and I thought that how amazing would it be if my children got to hear. I have 2 boys, and they get to hear a song called "God is a Woman" on the radio. That would be amazing. And all of a sudden, this came to me. And later on in the voice note, you hear Richard Göransson, who's an amazing guitar player, came into the room, and I just put my hand out because he saw that I was doing something. But what he did, which changed everything, was he grabbed the guitar and he tried to find chords to what I was singing. When all is said and done, you believe God is a woman, and you comes up with that riff. I love the way you move me, my one. When all is said and done, you believe God is a woman, and you. And I was like, that was it, because I couldn't figure out the ending until he found the chords.
Wow, that's incredible.
And yeah, that just, you know, and it was so funny. Right after the voice note stopped, you hear Ilya run into the room, go, "What was that?" and it was one of those things where we had that chorus. We tried another song. It didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. And and this is, you know, during that time when I really realized, like, oh, my trick is that, like, oh, if you have that magic chorus, that's sacred. And if it doesn't, whatever you write before that doesn't make a chorus feel great, and you really love that chorus, then it's not right. Then you got to find the right thing. And we couldn't find the right thing for that chorus. Ilya flipped the track on it and did this beat. And then I was thinking, okay, we're going to have, because there was a number of people that wanted to try it. And then I thought, let's just do it with the rapper. We'll find a rapper. And I remember at the end of the Sweetener sessions that we had done, I think we had done Breathing and we had done No Tears. I think we had Every Time by then is what I think. Ari was leaving to go home. I think she was finishing Breathing vocals or something. She might remember this better because she's younger. And I didn't want, Ilya was like, we should play her God is a Woman. And I was nervous too because other people had tried it. I didn't want her to feel like she's getting like a recycled idea. I mean, and he goes to her and I was like, no, I don't. I just wanted to be sensitive to her. And then he just, right when she's walking out the door, she's like, hey, Savan has this chorus called God is a Woman. You want to hear it? And she just goes, "It's what now? It's called what? That's my song." You know, she knew, and she cracked it. She cracked the, yeah. She was like, "Give me a chance with it," and I'm like, "Yeah, like let's go, do it."
Amazing.
And it was, you know, it was amazing. I'm so grateful for her and Ilya to actually say it because I wouldn't have said it, and otherwise it wouldn't have existed. And she cracked it. I remember I was in San Diego getting my son's Swedish passport at the consulate, and we were supposed to meet that day, but she got there early and she sent me a text going, I think I've cracked the pre-chorus. And she sent me the lyric to the pre-chorus and then sent me a voice note. And I was like, oh my God, I was trying to get back as soon as possible so we could finish it and record it. But it was, I loved it. I really love that song. And I have such special memories of that song.
Amazing. You just mentioned No Tears Left to Cry, Ariana Grande. Is that a similar story of how that song came about?
Similar story with a different person. Max actually brought in the start of that chorus melody. He had like da na 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 na, and then we adjusted the ending, and we just felt that was super special. And then she came in and we wrote it with her, and it was that was a 4-day pre-chorus. We couldn't figure out the pre-chorus for that. Same thing. I get in pre-chorus hell sometimes, but the same thing. It was like 4 days, and finally the most obvious solution was following the pad. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Even though it's raining down. But even though you have a gift like her, you have a tool like her voice. She's
Next level.
Next level. I mean, even by the way, as a songwriter, as people are witnessing now with the new album, she's once in a generation talent.
Definitely. It's interesting because you've written so many songs with her team, with Max, for Ariana. We just heard No Tears Left to Cry, Breathing, Greedy, break up with your girlfriend, I'm bored. But it's interesting because Ariana Grande's most viral song on social media is an unreleased song. But what amazed me is you're credited as the producer and background vocalist for it. I don't know if you remember it, but do you remember making a song called Fantasize?
So that's where social media goes wrong. That wasn't my song. I was on my sabbatical during that song. So I wasn't even in LA or working. That was her and Max. They were working on a TV show. Or he was working on a TV show and asked her to come help him write some songs.
Kind of like a parody thing.
I don't know the details of the show. I was helping write one that leaked called Gloss. I was helping them tweak some lyric stuff with it. But yeah, I was in my sabbatical of 2.5 years in Sweden, being a full-time dad.
Was that a good break from everything?
Yeah, I mean, I had worked myself into a pretty dark depression. Towards the end of 2018, I found myself in a very, very dark place. Like I had an exit plan and everything. Like I was like,
Wow.
it just snuck up, and I went through 2019 knowing I had this plan in place, barely getting through every day. It just became, it was just, somewhere along the way, and I'm open to talk about it because I feel like it's like another person. I think people that have gone through that, if they feel comfortable, should talk about it, because a lot of people I think go through it. Somewhere along the way with, my backstory of, how I was raised and everything, self-worth and achievement got wrapped up together, and nothing made me feel good. No hit made me feel good. Anything that didn't succeed made me feel worse about myself. And then I felt worse about myself because there were things going well. And what kind of person would feel so horrible about life when he has a beautiful wife and 2 kids and his career that's, and I remember when, like the Charlie's Angels song, when that didn't really work, I felt like I didn't understand why my kids wanted to hug me. That's how messed up my sort of thinking was, this sort of intertwinement of self-worth and achievement. And without going into too much detail, sort of in early 2020, a friend who I won't name just for her own sake, caught me in the sense of there's something off here, and pushed me to get into therapy and save my life, to be honest with you.
Wow.
So I took time off. We moved back to Sweden. Then we had when I started feeling better, I thought I was done. I was like retired. I was like, I told everyone, like, I'm out because I don't see a way through this. And we moved back to Sweden mostly to sort of like take the alcoholic out of the bar, like being in LA and being around everything was, let me just get away from it all. And then when I started feeling better, we had a family illness. We had cancer hit my household and had to go through that. And that was during COVID as well. So we So yeah, it took a while to get back
Definitely.
to it, you know.
If before a big catalyst for you, or like what was giving you value at the time, was success, has that changed now?
Absolutely. It, you know, and I think it's so interesting because I talk about this with people all the time, like high achieving sort of individuals, that the people, what it takes to get there is a hole in you that you're trying to fill, that you'll never fill. That's why they keep going, right? I just happened to have the unfortunate where my DNA got me into a dark place of potential self-harm, you know? And, but for very high achieving people, there is a hole that you're trying to fill. And it's this vicious cycle, you know, because almost, you know, and I do think about, do you need that hole to be as successful? And I almost feel like you kind of do to a point, you know, but a lot of people maybe don't go to the dark place. They're just always trying to chase this carrot. Because if music is if you know, being a songwriter is what you choose to fulfill that hole, and you need that success, it's never going to be fulfilled, right? Because you have a hit and then you don't have a hit a few weeks later. It's no longer a hit. And then it is this never ending thing. And gosh, I was so lucky. I look back at that time, my God, like I was so lucky to be in the rooms I was in, to be surrounded by the talent I was, you know, around, and the gifts that the universe were dropping into my head, like, you know, the God is a woman, the What Makes You Beautifuls. And I definitely have a different approach now in how I do things and what I choose to do. You know, and one of those things was I've decided to sort of dedicate a lot of my time into helping other Indian creatives in music sort of get a break and give them a shot. So I was in the middle of structuring that and going to Mumbai a lot and just, you know, doing a whole thing to make sure I'm not the only Indian guy in the room. And, you know, and I'll do a couple projects here and there a year that I love. And I'm focused a lot of my time in film and TV development and soundtracks that I love and things like that.
So in a sense, what drives you went from success to more of a purpose.
Yeah, exactly. You know, luckily I have the luxury of doing that. I know not everybody does. The sort of blessings of the success that I had allowed me to now, like, yeah, I'm going to pick and choose what I feel like doing. And I have a different purpose in life, and it's all about doing things that just inspire me, not to get success, but just that's inspiring, and things that things that I think my kids will enjoy or that will inspire other creatives that were like me when I was a teenager.
I appreciate you talking about all of this, because I think it's something that often doesn't get brought up when it comes to talking about the industry, when it comes to talking about even like creators today with viral posts. They put their entire value worth on if a video goes viral. I've even done that, where if a video doesn't do well, I feel horrible about myself. So
yeah. And it's sad because social media is going to obviously amplify that. So you guys have a tough time because you live in a world where that's everything. But yeah, I always give this advice to friends that if you feel self-worth and achievement or achievement is affecting your self-worth, that's when you gotta go into therapy or figure out why that is, because eventually that'll get so entangled. I think mine got so entangled that it could have meant my kids didn't have a father, you know? And before it gets too late, I always recommend that, because the thing is, it isn't, you know, it's so subjective and it's so random, like success nowadays, you know, especially when it comes to something being viral, and you know what I mean? If it could be something you do on purpose, everyone would do it, you know? So, yeah, it was a great lesson to learn that like success or achievement and success has nothing to do with the person. You know, I've met very successful people who are horrible people, and you go, how is the universe giving these people, you know, but you know, you just have to also find what fulfills you and makes you happy, because it's so cliche and it's so easy for someone with success or money or whatever to go like, oh, that stuff doesn't matter. And I do wish that people would know that before they get money and success, and then they realize it. You know, like the reason why a lot of people with money and success end up getting all spiritual at the end is because they realize that's not going to fulfill them. And it really is true. It doesn't. It changes. It takes away certain stresses and problems. But then, if you haven't fulfilled that thing, if you've got that hole that you're trying to fill, no money, no success, nothing is going to fill that hole unless you fix it yourself.
Definitely. I'm glad we talked about that specifically. Are you comfortable continuing to talk about the hits as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I like totally.
No, I'm glad. I'm really
up
glad.
the mood.
I again, like, that's something that I'm experiencing right now, and I'm trying to figure out as well. So a lot of those questions are for sure for like anyone who's watching, but also I almost feel that I'm like approaching that level of tying self-worth to that. I've been trying to figure out how to go away from that. So I'm glad to hear you.
Yeah, it's definitely worth putting the work in to
definitely
keep them separate.
So you just had a big hit with Ariana Grande and The Weeknd.
Yeah.
Love Me Harder. Is that how The Weeknd Can't Feel My Face comes together?
Yeah, so we started talking, him and I, and I mean, first of all, again, generational talent.
Definitely.
Visionary, this guy. I mean, he's a great guy as well. We started talking a lot, talking about how our process was and how he works. And you know, it was this thing of like trying to, you know, figure out how the worlds could meet in a way that's authentic to him, because he's the leader of that. And we weren't always used to that. Like, you know, we're used to like pop stars and we'll give ideas, you know, and, but for The Weeknd, it was, you know, it's his vision. It's his thing, you know, for sure. From day one, it wasn't something he grew into. Sometimes people grow into that. And then after a few hits and albums, they are steering the ship. From the moment we met him, he was steering the ship. It's his vision. And, it was me, Peter Svensson, Al Piami at first. And the first thing we did, it took a few days to crack something that felt good, because it was either we were taking him too much in our world, or it was going way too much in where his space he was, and it wasn't sort of resulting in what everyone had expected it to, which was to find this sort of happy medium. And the first song that felt like we got there close to it was In the Night. And it was, that got everyone excited. Okay, this is going to work together. Like, you know, and then after that, Can't Feel My Face showed up into our lives as, and again, I credit that very much, the sonics of that is Ali Piami, and Abel sort of saying what he wants, and Ali executing it. And we, you know, the funny thing with Can't Feel My Face was that we all thought In the Night was the song. Everyone thought In the Night was the song at the time.
Wow.
And it wasn't until some weeks before release that it was swapped. You know, I guess I got a call from Charlie Walk, who was the promo guy at Republic at the time. He said, "Bro, I just spoke to Abel. It's going to be In the Night. It's going to be Can't Feel My Face." I was like, "Really?" Because at the time, that's what we just all thought In the Night was the song. But it was amazing to, again, I'm like such a pop guy. So I wasn't like hip to like The Weeknd and the culture he was building until we started working with him. We saw one of his shows at the Hollywood Bowl, and we're like, oh shit, you know, this guy is not only a visionary, but he's brave as fuck, because he could have continued doing what he was doing. And, you know, and then Earned It popped. So we started having commercial hits. He did not need us, you know. But to be brave enough to go, okay, I'm going to try this new way of doing something and working when you already had this massive success, that's a pretty brave thing for an artist to do, I think. And I think all the great ones are brave like that. Like, I think all the great ones, there's this great David Bowie quote where he says, an artist should live in the place where you when you're walking into the beach, like, you know, if you're on the sand and you walk into the water and you keep walking and you keep walking and the water rises and rises and rises. And then it gets to the point where the water is like right above your upper lip and you kind of have to lift your head up and it's sort of this uncomfortable feeling. Have you ever felt that? That's where an artist should live. And it's like such a great way of putting it because that's what Abel does, it seems, all the time. Like he just pushes and he was a visionary. And it was funny for me and the rest of the guys because we were never like the cool people. Like we did the pop stuff, not like the cool stuff, you know? We did the songs that the labels forced their artists to do. You know what I mean? Yeah. They would work, but it would be it wasn't like the stuff the artists wanted to do. And for the first time, like artists were calling me up going, hey, like, I heard you're working with The Weeknd. Can I come listen to what you guys are doing? You know, it was like, and I was like, oh, wow. This is like, all of a sudden we're like cool because we had songs of The Weeknd. And yeah, I mean, my second son was born when we got the chart numbers for Can't Feel My Face, and it was number 2. I was like trying to it went to number 1 the following week. But I remember being in the birthing suite going, this is how bad I was, by the way. Like I was in the birthing suite looking at chart numbers, you know, or waiting for the text to come. Did we get number 1? Rather than focusing on my kid. But it was fun. I mean, I learned a lot by working with him. Learned to really just trust the artists sometimes. Like, you know, we were so used to, before working with Ariana, like I was used to like sort of manufactured boy bands and all these kind of things. They were part of a machine, not to make it all like that, but it was like, you know, or a lot of times it would be you write a song, the label convinces the artist to do it. But to have like it was the first time working with a very artist-driven project, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ariana was like what became that as well, but like from day one, Weeknd was like, here's my vision, you know, and it was amazing for us to like, oh, okay, we have to give up some control here, you know.
Then you go on to have hits with Sam Smith. Then it wasn't huge at first, but today Demi Lovato's most viral song that has taken over TikTok was Cool for the Summer.
Yeah. Sam Smith one was great. Sam, again, loveliest human, so talented. I remember I wasn't even sure if I was going to do that session because I felt like I didn't have any ideas. I hadn't really met him before, so I always sometimes felt like I have to come with an idea. And my wife knew I loved the show This Is Us, and it was a Wednesday when I was working with Sam. She was like, well, just don't cancel. Just like, wasn't that show you like? Wasn't that on yesterday? Go watch that before you go to the studio. And I was watching, I don't want to spoil anyone who hasn't seen This Is Us, by the way, with the greatest drama ever on network television. Shout out to Dan Fogelman, who created it. So I watched this episode of This Is Us, and for those of you have you watched This Is Us before? Do you know that show? No,
but my mom is a big fan of it.
Okay, so your mom will know this episode. There's an episode where they find out that the dad had a brother, and Mandy Moore's character says something like, I don't understand how he slept knowing he was lying to me. Like with empathy, she was like, I feel so bad that he kept a secret. Not that she was mad at him, more that he probably, it must have been so hard. How did he sleep knowing he lied to me? And right away, again, one of those things for the universe, I started singing into my phone. I started singing, how do I sleep when I lie to you? All that pain and all that pressure. I'm looking that my love will keep me up tonight, baby. And I was like, oh, that feels like George Michael. That's a good chorus. So I would go in the studio with confidence. And I'm like, I think I have something. And then Sam, of course, being brilliant, switched it to How Do You Sleep When You Lie to Me? And, you know, and saw it for what it was. And then Ilya did an amazing job with the track. And then There you go.
I love that. This Is Us inspired.
Yeah, and luckily I was on a Zoom once with Dan Fogelman because he was helping. He was giving some advice on the show I was developing. Very, very lovely, kind guy, and I got to tell him the story, which was awesome. And he freaked out. He was like, "Oh my God, I got to tell my wife." I was like, "What do you mean? Oh my God, you're Dan Fogelman. You created This Is Us." Yeah, and then Cool for the Summer. Again, it's just, I love Demi. I have such a soft spot for Demi. I'd had a hit with her before back in the Cher Lloyd days where Cher jumped on the song, Really Don't Care. We had a great hit with that.
That song's great too.
Oh, thanks. And I had a good relationship with Demi. We did Confident. and that felt good. And which ended up being like this huge sync song, Everywhere I Go Confident. But you know, she always loved the guitar thing. I always saw her as like a new Kelly Clarkson, because she has such a fantastic warm tone and voice. And you know, I said I want to do something with guitars. Ali had this track. It felt like chaos, but it was genius in this chaos of this sort of sonic landscape. We had to cut in, you know, paste parts of it. And he was so good at that stuff. He is. And yeah, we just crafted the song. Like, it took a long time to craft Cool for the Summer, by the way, because it's a very different structure. It was the same, one of those things where the song is most important, that we had like bits of it. Tell me what you want, think you love it, okay. I've got that on my computer as well. Actually all the voice memos of writing Cool for Summer and the different versions and stuff. And
so you write into your phone a lot of the times. Right?
Yeah, that time I would use GarageBand as my dictaphone, so I've got a lot of stuff on old GarageBand. Because then you can save track by track, right? Yeah. So that's what I did, and there's a bunch of Cool for the Summer stuff. And sat with Demi for a bit, cracking it. Then Alexander Crinlin, same guy who seemed to be at that time my problem solver, you know, came in, why don't you sing that riff? Da 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 da. You know, Cool for the Summer, wait for the mother, you know. And it's a very different structure. It was a hard song to crack because, you know, as you know, you have the pre and then you have an instrumental before the chorus comes in, right? Mm-hmm. And that was like weird to everyone, but we managed to make it work. And it was that was such a team effort, that song, you know.
Amazing.
And she killed it. I mean, Demi's, again, what a talent. So underrated as a talent.
Vocalist, as a writer.
I mean, I think she's incredible. Definitely. I just love her.
You also co-wrote one of, actually, I think it's Ellie Goulding's biggest song, Love Me Like You Do. Yeah. How did that song come about?
So, funny enough, again, credit to that song is Ali Piami and Ilya. They actually had that they had that pretty much there, and I just filled in blanks, wrote lyrics, you know. Both of them, me and Max went to go see screenings or like scenes of 50 Shades of Grey. We were told this hyped movie is going to come out, and they wanted songs from us. And so we went and we saw those scenes, and the helicopter scene where the song happens, and went back to the studio. I think it was the same day or the next day. The night before, Ali and Ilya, not even knowing about the 50 Shades of Grey thing, started this idea. And Max called me up because he had heard it. And he goes, hey, isn't this great for that scene? And then I was like, yeah, shit. So wrote it for that scene. The thing of like, the calm my blood, because I've never been so high, let me take you past the satellites and all that, those lines. We're from watching the scene where they're in like a helicopter. I don't know if you've seen the movie. I haven't. But I just seen the scene, and they're like in a helicopter going above the city. It was great. It started this wonderful relationship that I really cherish with Ellie Goulding, who has like, I mean, come on, her voice is just insane. Her tone.
Yeah, very unique.
And we're really grateful she agreed to do the song, because she's a sort of songwriter. She normally wouldn't do like an outside song. And other than Burn, I think was the only other one. And she did Love Me Like You Do and was so gracious. And and it's become this classic love song, which is wild, you know.
People playing it at weddings.
Yeah. But I really got to give Ilya and Ali a lot of that credit. It's a fantastic melody that they came up with.
Amazing.
And we got a Golden Globe nomination for that. So that like opened up this whole world of like, ooh, this is fun. This is like, you know.
Yeah, you start making music for movies.
Yeah, that really gave me the bug. I mean, I saw music for movies as a way for me to get into movies.
For sure.
You know, I started then meeting directors and blah, blah, blah. And then I'd be like, oh, I've got this idea for a film. And then started selling some movies, you know. But I've been using music as my way to sort of, to get in.
And it's worked.
It's worked so far, thankfully. It was, you know, Eurovision happened after that.
Yeah.
Charlie's Angels and Eurovision sort of happened around the same time. And Eurovision, again, sort of during my depression days, but it was like this light. I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah.
It was just so fun to work with Will Ferrell and the director David was like, he did Wedding Crashers, which it's like unbelievable. I love that movie. So it was super exciting. It was just a fun, exciting time to like, that was sort of my solace during my sort of depression was that movie and being a part of that process. And, you know, and yeah, we got and gave an Oscar nomination to us. So that was like
Incredible.
an incredible experience. Sometimes I forget that happened, you know, to be like, oh yeah, I got an Oscar nomination. That's kind of fun, you know.
I love that movie. Eurovision Song Contest is a movie that me and my family watch all the time.
Oh, that's so nice
Will
to
Ferrell,
hear.
one of the best comedy
Great.
actors of our generation.
An unbelievable person as well.
How was it like working with him?
He was amazing. Just the greatest guy. I got to spend a fair amount of time with him. His wife is Swedish as well, so we kind of bonded over that. Yeah, just the greatest guy, and still in touch to this day. And like, yeah, we're like, I can't say there's something going on with Eurovision that I can't say that's going to be exciting. That we're still working on.
I'm excited.
But yeah, it opened up a whole world for me. You know, when you get that Oscar nominee attached to your name, all of a sudden films that I was developing, all these deals that were in limbo, all of a sudden get done. And like now it's like, oh, okay. And it opens up a whole world of, I really, really enjoy like doing that, like soundtracks and stuff like that. So it opened up a whole world of other opportunities. And during my like sabbatical, you know, sorry, I'm bumping the mic. During my sabbatical, like when I felt like I needed to be creative, I was selling films and TV shows. And then when I wanted some music, we did do the Paw Patrol song for the Paw Patrol movie, or Ron's Gone Wrong, and doing things that I think my kids would like. And then I got a call to do this great movie I'm super excited about, called The Idea of You, where we're launching this boy band, August Moon. You can follow on TikTok at August Moon. And their first song just launched a few days ago, which we're super excited about.
Big fan of that song, by the way.
Thank you
Dance
so much.
Before We Walk.
Dance Before We Walk, yeah.
It's a great song.
Yeah, thank you. They're great. I mean, it's a fun project to sort of create a band in a film and blend it with the real world, and seeing the reaction has been so fun. And the film's closing South by Southwest. It'll be out May 2nd. So it's going to be fun to go to South by Southwest with the film closing South by Southwest after how I started when I was a teenager sneaking into South by Southwest, you know?
Wow.
So it's kind of a fun full circle.
Right
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because Anne Hathaway is a big part of that movie.
Yeah.
She had a really big moment for music with Les Mis and everything like that. In terms of creating music for a fictional boy band, is that different from writing music normally, or is it pretty much the same process?
It goes back to the old days of me doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like once I started working with like the Arianas and the Ellies, and then you're writing with an artist has a vision, or you're collaborating on a vision. But the artist has such an important and strong sort of point of view that you're basically in the service industry to that artist and their vision, right? And their point of view. Before those days, I'd be writing for like, you know, Simon Cowell's bands like Westlife or Shane Ward or some of these UK acts, and you're writing basically for the record label's taste. Does that make sense? And so it's not like a particular artist point of view. It's you're writing just great. You're trying to write great pop songs, and you get to be the artist a little bit, right? Like Definitely. What Makes You Beautiful. I got to be the artist a little bit. It was a song that was, you know, and this just let me go back to those days, which I do miss a little bit of being like just writing what I want, what I would love to say, and things that I think are fun. Not that I don't think the music I was making was fun, but just go back to again, why I got into pop, why I love pop music, which is boy bands and creating a phenomena, and like, and I love that. I love just free not trying to be cool, just great pop songs, you know, daring to not be cool and not thinking about the radio. You know, there's a box that you get that your songs have to be put in when you're structuring for radio and all these things. And there's no box to be put in for that, you know, and that's really creative in a different way, which I love. Like Eurovision, I would have never, you know, it was so fun to write like Lion of Love and Cooling with the Homies, because we're not trying to be cool. We're not trying to fit in this radio box, you know? So with this movie, it's been a little bit of, it felt like I was going back to the old days.
Definitely. I want to come back to the idea of you. One song I really wanted to ask about, one of my favorite songs in the entire film, Husavik,
Yeah.
My Hometown. Is it true that that song wasn't originally supposed to be in the film at first?
Well, we tried so many different songs for that. There was a song called Looking in the Mirror that Demi sings, going back to the awesome Demi Lovato. That for a moment was going to be the final song. Dave Dopkins, the writer, or the director, and I kept going back and forth on the final song. It took, I think there was like 11 different versions of Husavik.
Oh, wow.
Before we settled on that version. So yeah, it was maybe potentially going to be in a different spot in the movie. And then as the song developed and me and David started agreeing, and then Will as well, started going, you know what, this is probably the song.
And then sung by, had it written,
Molly Sandin.
Yeah.
Yeah, Molly Sandin is one of
Incredible.
Swedish biggest pop stars. And she was so gracious to be the voice of Sigrid. And Rachel McAdams sang a little bit as well, you know. And Rachel's a better singer than she thinks she is. But yeah, it's all those big notes and stuff. It's Molly Sandin. She killed it. And it was a great thing to be a great fun thing to be a part of, and just seeing how, like, hearing you say that your family watches that movie. It's a different thing than when someone is like, "Oh, I love that song." It's like being a part of a film like that becomes like a cult classic kind of thing. Because in Europe, where I'm in Sweden, like, so many people will, like, they think that's what I do. And that's what they recognize me from, is my name in the credits of Eurovision, you know. But it's so fun to be a part of stuff like that.
Amazing. For the idea of you, you definitely had to channel the songwriting from boy bands and everything like that. Why are you super excited for that movie specifically to come out?
Yeah, because I think it deals with a lot of interesting topics. The age gap between the two characters, and Anne's character and Nick's character. I think it's the way they handle it. And the director, Michael Showalker, the way he's handled it is so great. You really see the consequences of, because in a way it's a bit of a Notting Hill, like in that sense that you see the consequences of situations. You also get to know a pop star, and luckily they were great with taking ideas and asked advice about what would that person type would be going through, and you get to see a different side of that whole thing, the imposter syndrome and those kind of feelings that I've been around in my past with a number of different groups and that got famous. And you see that's always not what it seems, and yeah, it's just a really beautiful story. And I'm really proud of the music. There's a song at the end of it called "The Idea of You" that I'm really proud of. And yeah, and if you love like boy band, like fun, like lighthearted boy band pop songs, like you'll really like this movie as well. You'll love the soundtrack. It's really good. I think we did a really good job of getting it right, if I have to toot my own horn. Yeah.
Amazing. And it's great that the song that connected with a ton is literally the name of the entire film as well. It's cool.
So yeah.
Are there any songs, like, for all the songs you've written, is there any one that like is your favorite for any like specific reason, or any one that like really stands out in particular?
Oh gosh. It's so hard because I'm always super critical with my songs. I mean, there's ones that I'm really proud of. Also just seeing what it meant to my life and how it's changed my life, thankfully, that for the audience who listened to it and the artist to record it. Like, What Makes You Beautiful was a big life shift for me. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud that like my children get to have, you know, my 11-year-old and 8-year-old, and that song is such a big part of their world, not because of me. The fact that it's like still out there and it still matters. Like they hear it at school, like their teachers play it at school during PE. It's like become one of this.
Yeah.
Like, so if they had no idea that I wrote this song, it would be one of the songs they hear sort of more commonly in their life, and they know it's about their mom. So I just love that they get to go walk through life knowing that this song is about their mom. So I'm really proud of that. You know, the way that Santa Tell Me is connected to everyone. I'm a big Christmas guy.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of that and the life that it's had.
I actually have a theory about Christmas music.
What, that Hindus write the best Christmas songs? I mean, we're one for one.
Well, it's actually funny because most, like the biggest Christmas songs aren't written by people who celebrate Christmas.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I love that. I love that there are so many people able to like share their own like version of the holiday and like be a part of it still.
Yeah.
But one of my theories about it is people connect with Christmas music because of nostalgia. So they grow up hearing it. So a song doesn't become a Christmas hit or a classic until around 20 to 30 years after it comes out. And I feel like that's happening with 3 songs in particular. One is Santa Tell Me. Another is Mistletoe, Justin Bieber. And the other is Underneath the Tree, Kelly Clarkson. I think those are the 3 songs we're going to see also become the classics.
Listen, thank you. I'm so proud of that song and what it's done. You know, so I think, you know, really proud of One Last Time and, you know, God Is a Woman, and you know, it's also to me some of them are like, it's also about the time, like what it meant to me and how I grew as a writer from those songs, if that makes sense. So yeah, and since I've been back to work, you know, there's a couple things coming out hopefully at the end of the year that I'm really excited about and proud of. That I can't talk about, but I'm really proud of those things.
Well, when you can, I'm very excited to watch and see them and be a part of it as well, because, you know, you've done so much and you're a huge inspiration to everyone out there, but especially me. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for everything that you've done being a part of this. I want to ask, what's a piece of advice you have for songwriters, producers, anyone that wants to get in this industry, be a creative?
One advice I'd say, and this is going to sound pessimistic, but I just mean it because it weeds out whether you are really meant to do it or not, is that you have to be willing. You have to go in knowing that you're going to starve for it. You know, you have to be willing to sacrifice and starve for it because it's not easy, but you have to love making music enough that it doesn't matter if you make a living making it. You just want to make it. And those are the people that end up being the big ones. And second is cliche, but it's perseverance. If you really believe in it and believe in something, you gotta push it through. You could tell me one of my songs, and I'll tell you like an artist or label person or someone who didn't believe in it. You know what I mean? And then melody. Melody is a universal language. And don't forget that melody. There'll be cycles in America where lyrics will matter more, but globally, traditionally, melody. That's the universal language, and you know, listen, it's tough nowadays, right, with streaming, and I sometimes fear that music is becoming like photography. You know, when it becomes easy for everyone to do it. You know, there's very few things that cut through. There's very few iconic new photographs, right? But I believe that if the bar is set when you're creating, that the world doesn't need just another good song. The world needs something that they need. You know, it has to be something game changing. So I encourage new writers and producers to be creative and to push boundaries. And to think of that. Think of like, does the world need this song? Or is this just like, it's a good song. There's 140,000 songs released on Spotify every day.
That's crazy. That's just Spotify.
And when you're writing, like you're competing against every other song ever written because we all have access to it on the same technology, right? So old songs don't feel old to kids now because it's on the same technology. Like my kids came from school a few months back and they're like, oh my God, Papa, have you heard this new song called Mama Said Knock You Out? You know what I mean? But to them, because it's on the same technology, it's not like when I was a kid, it was like, oh, records, that's old. You know, I'm on CDs.
That's interesting.
So I would just encourage, music matters. Like music matters. Like great music matters. It's still powerful. Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
We can end on my story if you want. When I was in Sweden during like the early days, this was like 2008-ish, sort of towards the end of the Bush or early Obama administration. Sweden took in the more Iraqis than America did after America bombed Iraq.
Wow.
And all the cab drivers were a lot of Iraqis, you know. Mm-hmm. And I was in this cab and this guy goes, oh, where are you from? And I said, I'm from, forgive my accent. So I'm from America. So where are you from? He's like, I'm from Iraq. I was like, oh. He goes, yes, I moved here with my son, my young son. I lived in a village with my wife and 2 boys. America bombed my village. We had no terrorists in our village, but America bombed the village, and I lost my oldest son and my wife, and Sweden took us in. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he's like, I was a doctor in Iraq, but now I drive cabs. But he was like a jolly guy. I was like, I'm so sorry, man. Like, so how does like someone like you or your son, how do you grow up not hating America and having like bitterness towards someone like me? Because I was from Texas, you know. And he goes, music. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, it's hard to hate people that make something you love. And that really sticks with me, right? Is that music still matters. So it's still a privilege to make music and to create music. So keep that in mind, you know, when creating it, that you want to make something that really matters.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Savan, for being a part of this. It literally means the world. This is for you.
Oh, thank you so much, man. It was a pleasure to meet you. Congrats on everything.
That also means the world, coming from you. And I'm glad it's been a long time coming, so I'm glad we finally had the chance to chat and hopefully continue chatting for the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man.